Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of the Geeking Out podcast. My guest this week is Heath Hatton, the owner of Stride Pro Wrestling, former AAPW tag team champion, trainer, and a guy I was happy to say I've seen really mature over his career. First of all, Heath, thank you for doing the show with us.
Well, thank you for having me. I was excited about it.
So, my first question to you is the one that's I do for all my wrestling guests. Were you a wrestling fan growing up, and what got you interested in pro wrestling?
Yeah, I was a huge wrestling fan. All I ever wanted to be was a professional wrestler. So there was, I never really wanted to do much anything else. I always pretty much wanted to wrestle. So it started. My dad, we lived in town, and my dad worked for a cable company. He was the cable guy. So we
Gotcha.
got free cable, and I was maybe 5 or 6, but I can remember watching it. I was Hulk Hogan fan, and then actually my dad's a big deer hunter, and we moved out in the country and no longer were able to get cable. So I took a wrestling hiatus until probably I was I when I came back it was NWO. So probably
Gotcha.
96, 97, and from then on out it never went away. I was completely obsessed with WCW. I was a WCW guy through and through until Austin got pretty hot, and then WCW got really bad. So I kind of switched away. But yeah, I mean, just wrestling is it's all I ever really wanted to be. It's something that I've just always been overly obsessed with.
So, you've always wanted to be a wrestler. Did this translate to, in your younger years, amateur wrestling or sports to make you, that you think would help you become a wrestler? Or,
I I didn't really, so that was the thing. I didn't really know independent wrestling existed, to be honest. I I lived in a small town. There was 48 people in my graduating class. We could not afford pay-per-views. So I would get together with a group of guys whose mom would buy the pay-per-views and we pitch in $5. So with that being said, my school did not have amateur wrestling. However, I was a college athlete. I was a basketball player, a baseball player, cross country, and there's a thing on my wall. I won a ton of awards for sports in high school, all conference, MVP awards, et cetera. So I definitely was an athlete, but none of it was to be a wrestler because I didn't that's what I wanted to be. I did not know how it was possible. I didn't know internet was not big then. And so I mean, to me, it was like I viewed wrestlers and wrestling at the time as like movie stars. And
gotcha.
so I thought like I had to go to Hollywood or whatever to be a professional wrestler. I thought, that's what I thought of it as. So it wasn't until after I got out of college and sports, but while I was in college, I guess, I discovered independent wrestling. And then once I found out, like, no, it's local, no, you can do it, I was like, all right, where do I go? How do I get this rolling? So, but yeah, I was always an athlete. I always, I always kind of excelled in sports, and that sports was a huge part of my life. So yeah, I was definitely an athlete.
Awesome. So, you mentioned you were in college when you discovered that your wrestling dreams could become a reality. There was schools in your area. What school did you find, or what promotion did you find that kind of led you down the path of, hey, this is a reality, or this is possible for us?
So it's I was listening to your podcast with Edmund, and he hit the nail on the head. There was a there was a show in Crossville, Illinois, and I was getting gas. And I went inside to pay, and I saw a flyer for wrestling. And I was like, wait, what? And I was like, there's a wrestling show. And so I then I went up to Edmund during intermission. He was outside, and he told me he was from Marion. And I was like, I want to do this. So the only school at that time was in Alney, which was like about 2.5 hours. And that was IWAP and some other guys that went up there. But it was like 2.5 hours for me. And I didn't see a feasible way because my school was actually in the other direction. So
Gotcha.
I was like, how, there's really no way to get there. So I actually, there's a picture that I have of Edmund has me in a headlock. And then I have him in a headlock. But anyway, I was, I was so excited about it. And so I kind of added Ed on MySpace. And I would message Edmund from time to time. And then I kind of found out about AAPW. And I started then going to the shows. And I went to a couple. And then the main event was Shane Rich and Sean Schultz. And it was the most professional. I was watching those two guys, and I could not tell a difference between those guys and WWE wrestlers. It was like this amazing match that like captivated me. And I went in the hallway and I went up to Sean Schultz and I said, I want to be a wrestler. I want to do this. And he told me that he had heard. So I went to Edmund, and Edmund said that there was rumblings of a school opening. However, he was taking a hiatus. Gotcha. And so Edmund had taken, this was in 2008, and he had taken this hiatus, and I couldn't even really get a hold of him. And I was like, oh my God, like, how am I, and then AAPW was not really running, and I could not find AAPW stuff. And so I was like, oh my God, he had told me that we were going to have this school, and I have no clue how to find it,
Right.
Facebook wasn't a thing. And so I was very I'm just a very determined person, if you haven't kind of figured that out. When I get my mind on something, I can't stop. And so I was, very much determined to get this. But anyway, they did a show in 2009, and I went to it, and I went up to Sean, and I said, I was told you guys are having a wrestling school. I want to do it. And they told me, no, Curly is. They gave me the information. They gave me a card. Literally, that was on Saturday. That Monday, I showed up, and I said, nice. I'm here to train. I want to do this. And from that day forward, I walked in, and there was nothing that was going to deter me from that moment on.
Awesome. So you mentioned Curly started the school. Unfortunately, we haven't really touched in the past podcast really touched on Curly too much. For those listeners that maybe aren't from this area, explain Curly to those listeners, and what was Curly like as a trainer?
So Curly he is the funniest guy you could imagine. He is just absolutely hilarious. And Curly as a trainer was I'm big into working out. I'm big into fitness, and I'm big into entertainment. And Curly fit all those boxes. But Curly as a trainer had been to the power plant and WCW power plant. And so he kind of had that mentality with training. And so Curly was funny, but by God, you did not mess up. You were not allowed to mess up. You were not allowed to screw up. And he was a very, very, very tough trainer. But he was fair, and I learned, and to be honest, so like I said, one thing people, you heard from Mike and you heard from Edmund and all them talk about how crazy of a student I was and how
Right.
determined I was as a student. I bugged Curly so bad that he ended up giving me a key to the building because I would text him every day. Can we go up there tonight? Can I go up there and train tonight? Can I go up there and get in the ring tonight? Do you want to go get some work in? And it'd be Friday night. It'd be Saturday night. And I'd be begging him to let me come in there. So he finally gave me a key because that's the type of person I was. So Curly definitely, there would be no Heath Hatton today without Curly at all. So he opened the building. He opened the school. He was the owner. He was the guy he got the ring. He was the guy that did all of it. He was the guy that made this wrestling obsessed person that Heath Hatton is. So that was all Curly.
While you were training, was it all in on the training? I mean, did you have to work during training, or did you save up for this? I always like hearing the stories of people, whenever they finally start. You have
So
ones they balance work, school, and training. Some save for years to go all in. What was your story there?
mine was work, school, and training. So like this is kind of where I got a lot of respect, with the WWE stuff that I got to do, and because of, when I started training, I would get up at 4:30 in the morning and I would work out, and then I would get to work, at 6:30 or 7. I'd work till 3. I'd get off work at 3. I'd go home and eat, and then I would go straight to training, and then train till 8 or 9. Like, I heard Mike say on yours, I was the first one in. I was the last one to leave. I wanted to, I just, I had a family. I was actually married at the time, and I had a little girl, and so it was very difficult to, to juggle it all, to be able to pay your bills, to be able to train. And, but however, like, if there was training, I was there. I was the first one there. So, and if there was a show, I was there to set up. So there was many times that, and that was the thing about Curly that I learned when opening my school was you gotta work with people. Not everybody has $3,000 laying around.
Right.
So you got to work with people, and Curly worked with me, and he would work with me on my dues and my payments and stuff. So again, without him, this wouldn't have been possible.
So, you're a very driven wrestler, or driven to become a wrestler. Uh, Correct me if I'm wrong here. Was your first match in 2009 in West Frankfurt? Or did you have one before then? Because I remember that was the first time I personally ever seen you wrestle.
So that was, I always build that as my first day or my first show.
Right.
I'm sorry. I have to come over here and get my dog. Hang on.
It's okay.
I'm sorry about that. Come on. Well, she'll probably take a poop in your yard. Come on. She's a little friendly. I'm sorry. We got a new one, so she's a little jealous right now. So
I can market this episode to the dog lovers now. This is going to be awesome.
Yes. Yeah, sorry. Yeah,
It's
so
all good.
she kind of ran away. Lily, yeah, we got a new dog, and so she's a little jealous right now. So no, it's somebody. It was an abandoned dog, so maybe 4 or 5. So yeah, so but somebody abandoned it, and we got it, and but it's potty trained, so yeah. So all right. Okay. All right. So I'm sorry about that.
Oh, it's okay. Like I said, we got a new demographic. We got the dog lovers now in this episode.
Yeah. So yeah, that's the first on the podcast. My dog pushed the door open for those listening and ran next door, and then somebody bought a house next to ours, and they were moving in, and the dog was over there with them. So
That's
I
I,
apologize.
I know those feelings all too well with my dog, so it's all good.
So so anyway, what were we talking about? We were talking
Well,
about.
yeah, I mentioned my first time seeing you was
Okay, yeah. So
AAPW
it was.
2009. Yeah.
So I had started going up. There was a free show in Albany on Wednesday, and Curly and Shane Rich and sometimes Edmund, Jay Spade, Tony Flood, Dalton Diamond, all these guys would carpool and go up on Wednesday, and I would go up there, and I had matches. So my first match actually was against Shane Rich.
Oh wow.
So, and it was at Albany, and they had been. I didn't want to wrestle until I felt like I was able, and they had been trying to get me to wrestle. It was a free show. There was a crowd. They're like, Tyler, you can wrestle. You can do it. Anyway, we go up there one day, and Shane Rich walks up to me, and he says, "Hey, I'm working you tonight." And I go, in a match? And he said, "Yeah." And we had a match that night. And then I wrestled like A.T. Brooks. I wrestled Jay Spade a couple different times. However, when I got into it, this is the truth. I wanted to be an AAPW wrestler. I wanted to wrestle for them. I wanted to wrestle for Sean. So I've always said that December 5th was my first show, my first match, and it was against
Gotcha.
Carnage. However, technically, I did have a 7-minute match where Shane Rich beat the hell out of me and pinned me before then. And then I wrestled other people. However, I've always credited December 5th, 2009 as my first match.
It's funny you mentioned that because that was my first time seeing you, and you did wrestle Carnage because I do remember after that match because I saw like your family and your friends were there, and I remember just kind of thinking they made the poor guy lose to Carnage with his family there. What the fuck?
Um,
So I don't know if you.
Man, I always joke and I always give Carnage crap because God, he was like the person I could never beat. Like, I mean, he beat me all. I would like go to an APW show, and before I even went, I was like, I guarantee I'm working Carnage, and I guarantee he's going over. Like it was like a running, and then I would get him in a tag match, and by God, Carnage's team would go over, and I was like, is there any way? So I won't, at the Resurrection show, we kind of gave away who Carnage was, but
Right.
anyway, I finally always told him like, if you ever come wrestle for me, you're wrestling me and you're jobbing every single time.
uh, so from here, you really, you become quite the force in AAPW, and there's kind of this. I don't want to call it a lull period, but like there was a little inconsistent with AAPW from kind of the middle of 2010 to eventually when TV came. Do you have any memories of the time period before the TV deal?
Yeah, I mean, so luckily, like I said, I had met Ed, and those that know me, and the way it was, I was obsessed with every aspect of wrestling, from booking to setup to tear down to promoting. I wanted my nose in all of it. I wanted to understand it, and because I wrestling was something I wanted to be a part of for the rest of my life. So I luckily had the privilege of I would go because Ed was living in Marion at the time, and so I would actually pick up Ed and we would drive to training together. And so Ed, I know he told you on his podcast, I kept my eyes and ears open and my mouth shut. And I would pick Edmund's brain about everything, about booking, about all sorts of stuff. So I was very involved with Sean and Ed and all of them because it was I was just obsessed with it. I was engulfed in wrestling. It was, I was just completely mesmerized by it. But so, yeah, it was definitely, I can remember we were trying so hard and we were just drowning. It wasn't clicking, it wasn't working. And we had a show, and Sean had told me this is probably pretty much going to be it. And then along came Chris Hastrom, and uh, then it was like a whole different game. But yeah, up until Chris Hastrom came, it was it felt like it was the end. It
Right.
felt like it was sad because luckily I had kind of made a name for myself outside of there, but like I said, AAPW was my home. It was the whole reason that I got into wrestling was to be an AAPW wrestler, and to think that it was ending, it was it was sad. But yeah, that was from that time I made my debut until Chris Hagstrom came along. It felt like we were going under.
Right. So Chris Hackstrom comes along. AAPW gets local TV. Um, and I noticed just from a fan's perspective, when they got local TV, that's when you yourself really became uh, truly a featured guy in AAPW. I remember you and Curly won the tag titles. Um, well, first of all, what was it like being tag champions with Curly?
It was actually a huge surprise. I didn't find out I was winning them until like that day, and I had not held a championship up until then, and so I think it was one of those things where Golden Boy Greg Anthony was the booker at the time, and he told me, that day, this is what's happening, and it was like, one, Curly was at the time probably my best friend in the business. He was somebody who just always seemed like he was taking care of me and looking out for me. And so to win them with him, it was super cool. It was super, I always liked being in the ring with that guy.
Right.
I always liked being around him. I always liked, and I know he wasn't everybody's cup of tea, and he was, very, he focused more on the entertainment side. However, there wasn't a fan that Curly did not want to entertain. And I learned more from traveling with him my first year because we did some shows. And we did some shows with 10 people in the crowd, 8 people. And Curly was the same person with 8 people in that crowd or with 200 people in that crowd. I never seen him he was there to entertain and bring a smile to your face. And so that's the kind of person I am. And I liked seeing that. And being tag team partners, I got to see it basically firsthand.
Um, so that was pretty big for you, but something that I really, in my notes, I really underlined this because I didn't want to forget to ask you about it. Not a lot of people may know this, but you actually, through AAPW, got a shot at the NWA World's Heavyweight Championship against Adam Pearce. What was it like to be able to get that opportunity, and what was it like to wrestle Adam Pearce, who up until just recently with the resurrection of the NWA was really the man carrying that banner, you know, loud and proud. What was that like?
So at that point, so that was actually the anniversary was yesterday. So of that match. So we're recording this on the 23rd. That happened on the 22nd of September. So, um, we when that happened, I was actually working pretty regularly at OVW,
Okay.
and so I was going to OVW every week, and I had met a referee named Brandon Toll, who was actually a referee, for Impact. And Brandon and Adam were really good friends and really close at the time. And Brandon had basically said that Adam had this opening and he was talking with AAPW, and somehow Adam had came across and watched some of our stuff. And all of a sudden I got a call from Adam one day and said he was coming, and he had saw some of my matches and he knew Brandon and he wanted to work with me. And I was complete. That to me was more of a wow moment than anything else. And so that was, to me, it was like, it didn't seem real. I mean, even after the WWE stuff, I got, I got to wrestle, but I was never that guy that said, hey, I'm the guy who was on a WWE pay-per-view. I
Right.
was never the guy who, I didn't, I would joke about it with my friends, but like, that was, that was a cool experience, but that wasn't why I got into wrestling. So, to me, when somebody like Adam does that, and then to wrestle him, and then me and Adam, we were still friends to this day after that, and we became friends, and I talked to him on a pretty regular basis, and it was definitely, it was that whole AAPW experience, when so it from, we talk, I've heard you talk a lot about main event and how important main event was to you and how much you liked it. And from that to, I mean, I main evented like 6 or 7 shows on that first season. And when Curly left, this is a true story, a peek behind the curtain. I had never given a promo ever. And
Really?
and Curly had left, and they told me I had to give a promo, and I didn't know what to do or what to say, and I told Greg, I said, I don't want to do it, and he goes, what? And I was like, Curly's always talked, Curly's always entertained, I've just been the quote unquote arm candy, like I've never said anything, I've never talked, and that was the first promo I ever cut. Well, then when I started doing this stuff with Pierce, I gave like 5 or 6 horrible promos because I never got to give them. And it was Pierce that reached out to me and talked to me on the phone and talked me through how to give a promo and how he wanted me to do it. And then he had me send him a couple before we posted them. And that helped me learn how to give a promo because I didn't know how to do it. And you really didn't get that type of teaching or stuff in Southern Illinois at the time.
We've mentioned, because I really wanted to ask you about this, you mentioned that you did get to wrestle a WWE pay-per-view. Um, I can't remember exactly which pay-per-view it was, but I do remember seeing you and Ace Hawkins wrestling Ryback in his early days in 2012. What is it like to? What is the WWE pay-per-view experience like? What is, you hear all these different stories. What is the backstage area like for people who are being brought in to fill the role that you and Ace were filling that night? What were the guys like? What was the story? Do you have any cool stories from that? Just tell me about your WWE pay per view experience.
Well, the WWE pay per view experience was pretty cool. The guy that was supposed to have my spot didn't show up, and I got to talking to Ryback, and like I think I took the bump. I can't remember, and then they didn't want me to do it because I had tattoos.
Right.
Anyway, Arn Anderson and Ryback actually suggested that I get to do it because I'd done the thing where I acted like I didn't want to get tagged in or whatever. But I've been backstage a few different times, and that was not my first time backstage. So, but I actually, like, when you're backstage, you try not to talk to anybody because they see the same people every time. But you have guys like, I remember Cody Rhodes coming up and talking to me and giving me advice on because I didn't when Ryback pulled me over, my eyes were open, and he was talking to me about selling, make sure I always sold, and that he thought it was funny, and that he thought something. And I remember him talking to me, and I remember Santino Marella. I had a practice match one time, and him pulling me aside and telling me all this stuff. Another time, I had a practice match, and Scott Armstrong pulled me aside and told me that he loved it and he was wondering if I'd be interested in a private tryout. And that's how. And then he actually said that he talked to Adam, and Adam Pierce told him, and that's how I got my private tryout. And so, like, I had nothing but good experiences. The last time I was there, Joey O'Reilly was backstage, Brandon Espinosa was backstage. So it was like, it was fun. It was like, it was, I was there with my friends and with my boys, and it was, I traveled to OVW forever with Brandon Espinosa. So to be backstage with him was like, like a dream come true for me and him. I mean, we were driving to OVW, pitching in gas money, and here we are backstage together at WWE. So, I never had anything but good experiences backstage, and you hear horror stories and stuff, but, I'm friends with Matt Cross, and one of the times he was backstage with me. And so, getting to hang out backstage with him. And so, like I said, the WWE and the wrestling has just been nothing but, like great to me. It's just been nothing but, amazing.
Um, did you? I mean, you had the match on pay per view. Did you ever get to fill any other extra roles? Were you ever one of the cops, or were you ever one of the security guys that get beat up, or did you get to fill any of those roles in your times being
Oh,
backstage
yeah.
with WWE?
Oh, yeah. I mean, one time during a Lesnar Triple H thing, I was security. I was just recently the doctor for Becky Lynch when Asuka spit in her eye.
Oh, really? I need to look that.
Um,
I didn't notice that. I need to look back at that.
yeah, yep. I was that guy. So that was just this past January, I think, or February. I can't remember. One of those days. But yeah, I was the doctor, the medical doctor. So yeah, I've done a lot of different things for him, and done different roles. And one time I was supposed to wrestle Brodus Clay, and they had me get my gear on, and then my match got bumped, and so there's been different things that I've got to do with them. They've always I've had a good I can keep my mouth shut and do what I'm told, and so I definitely have got to do a lot of cool things, and plus the catering is always amazing. So.
Okay, well, since you mentioned that, you were like, how are these segments produced for the extras like you? Are you told, hey, are you told exactly what to do? Or are you kind of given cliff notes? For someone who's never been in a situation like that, like what is it like to be that extra guy?
The You have to be able to follow direction, not ask a lot of questions, um, basically gather all your knowledge when it's given to you. So, usually that like a producer or the agent in charge of the segment will pull you aside, tell you what they want, and then I usually I'll wait until the talent has their stuff, and then I'll ask, is there anything you want me to do, you don't want me to do, and then I kind of leave it at that. So when I'm security, usually there's an agent or a producer in charge of it. They talk to you, but then again, like I can pretty much fill out when I'm supposed to talk and when I'm not supposed to talk, and I wait for that opportunity. So then once I get it, then you get to know it. But yeah, it's definitely different nowadays than it was before. Before you got there, you put on your gear and you hope to have a practice match in front of some people that could see if you were good or not. Now you sit off to the side and they come and get you, and there's really no practice matches. There's no anything like that. You're used for different segments, and they pretty much make sure you can work before they bring you in. So it's definitely different than back in the day. I mean, you wrestled a practice match in front of everybody, and everybody's gathered around the ring and everybody's watching. So that's not the opportune time to suck, because if you suck, you're sucking in front of everybody.
um, just just now because I'm a big fan, I would kick myself if I didn't ask this. What's Becky Lynch like? Because she's one of my all-time favorites.
She was actually super nice. She was super sweet. She was super friendly. I can remember she had just came out that she was engaged, not too long before that. And so we were just standing there and I just asked her, anything you want me to do? And we had talked and then I just said, hey, congratulations on your engagement. And she's like, oh, thank you. And, but she was super nice, very very professional, very, very sweet, very you can just tell that she loves the business and she loves every aspect of it. And she wanted to make this segment amazing and great. And she handled herself with class and dignity. She was very proper, very wanted. You can just tell that she loved the wrestling business. And she was, like I said, I've been around people that treat some of the talent bad or don't really talk to them. She was not that way. She was actually quite the pleasure to work with and very, very, very classy.
You mentioned, Becky, Cody, and Santino. Any other just real positive people that from your time back there that you just want to mention for the listeners?
I mean, I was never treated poorly by anybody. So I was never, I mean, even the big stars. I mean, Chris Jericho was a super nice, giving, he talked. John Cena was very friendly, when I was there, and then and like Samoa Joe. I mean, all those guys that I've met or been around, Sheamus, they all have been nothing but nice and polite. I mean, I'm not bugging them.
Right.
It's hi, hello, or if they have advice to give. Again, I think that's a lot of the problem with wrestlers today. They don't want to take the time to listen, and they don't want to take the time to, I know on some of your other podcasts they talked about how good of a student I was, but throughout my career, I don't care if the biggest place you ever wrestled was AAPW. I don't care if the biggest place you ever wrestled was in the backyard. If you did it for 15 years and you talk to me, I'm going to give you respect and I'm going to listen to what you say. And I do the same thing at WWE. If you're going to talk to me and give me pointers, I'm going to keep my mouth shut and I'm going to listen. And I did that at WWE, and everybody was just completely friendly to me. So not one bad experience.
Awesome. I actually didn't know that you wrestled for OVW until you just mentioned it a few minutes ago. Uh, what was your OVW experience like, and just memories from OVW?
It was good and bad. Mostly good. It was my first taste of that big league type experience, and I met some really good people there. I wrestled with some really good people there. It really, at the time we were doing tapings for AAPW, so it really helped me understand because, a lot of the wrestlers at AAPW had not wrestled on TV.
Right.
So they did not know TV angles and, hard cameras and they knew that stuff from probably watching Monday Night Raw, but they didn't know about floating cameras and stuff. And I'll just be honest, Chris Hackstrom is a freaking genius, and he made it look good, but OVW really helped me understand and really helped me piece it all together. And there was a lot of, TNA, that was TNA's developmental at the time. And so there was a lot of good talent there that I got to talk to and pick their brain.
Um, it's okay to name some of the talent that you really learned from at OVW.
Like Robbie E was there for a little bit. He was super nice, super helpful. And then, I really leaned on a guy named Muhammad Ali Baez, and he wasn't in TNA, but he was such a tremendous talent. And then I'll be honest, man. Brandon Espinoza. I mean, that guy riding in the car with him and Mike Seidel every Wednesday. I mean, it's just the knowledge that I consumed. Like it made me the wrestler that I am, and it was the whole OVW trip was nothing but positive, and from riding in a car with those guys.
Um, so we've mentioned in the past with AAPW um, that we mentioned main events. There was turned out that unbeknownst to us at the time, there was a bit of an issue between the booker and the promoter. We chronicled this on a past episode. Um, as a talent, what were you thinking when all this was going on?
Um, I at this time, like I was, I had no problem with what was like at this point in my career when this was going on. I just wanted to wrestle. And I knew some of the rumblings that were happening because you had your AAPW core guys and they were kind of getting overlooked. And it was a hot topic, and it was you have this main event, and so this big huge thing, and then afterwards you switch. But in Sean's defense, he had been talking about switching it for a while, and I had known, and I knew it was going to go to Ed, and it was, you know, at the end of the day, AAPW is Sean's ship. It's Sean's baby. Sean created it, and Chris Hackstrom took it to a whole new level. But at the end of the day, those numbers are associated with Sean.
Right.
And he had his guys that he was loyal to, that he wanted to see. And, he didn't like the direction it was going. And he wanted to make a change. And it was, main event for me. If you look back at it, Curly had got let go, basically right before that.
Right.
There was no direction for me, and me and Kevin have talked about this on our podcast. Me and Kevin wanted me to be a part of the Mike Masters instead of Jay Spade, and Jay Spade is a great friend of mine. But because I was the one on the news and I was friends with Kevin, we thought it made the most sense for me to be involved in that storyline.
Right.
However, Curly got let go, and then we had to kind of rush, and then so what was supposed to happen at main event got changed. I had to work Golden Boy, who was an amazing wrestler, an amazing talent, but I didn't know where I was going from there. I didn't know who I was working. I didn't know, and I think that was kind of what was frustrating to Sean, is he was not being told the direction, and he wanted to know the direction. And I know from me, I had no clue. And I know Golden Boy put me over that night, but I was very disappointed. You had all these, you had Matt Cross there, and you had all these big names, and I was in a thrown together match, which again, I'm very proud of the match. It was a great match with Golden Boy. We told a great story. It's a great opener. He's an amazing talent. But as far as what I was supposed to do, I was worried that night because I didn't know where I was going from there. And so when the switch happened, I was not surprised. There was a lot of unhappy AAPW core guys backstage. So
Right.
I knew that Sean was going to have to do something because there was a very, very many angry people backstage.
Um, so eventually, and you'll listen to the Sean episode. He said he kind of knew that eventually a split was going to occur with himself, Hagstrom, and kind of the guys. He said this is not verbatim, but you can get his on the episode. He knew it was coming. He didn't realize it was going to be that soon. how are you told of the split with Chris and subsequently starting a Pro Wrestling Collision?
Chris had called and told me. Again, it was one of those things where I don't think Sean knew it was coming. Me and Kevin kind of could see the writing on the wall. The Chris is an absolute genius, and he is an amazing editor, and he is an amazing talent when it comes to anything with TV and producing and camera angle. I mean, just the guy's an absolute genius. However, the problem is, and it would be, the wrestling business is not always a joyful, happy business. There are egos, there's attitudes, there are grumpy men would be the best way to put it. And so a lot of people respected Ed because he was a wrestler, and they also respected Sean because of it was being Sean. However, people respected Chris because he put us on TV. However, Chris had like a sidekick, and he wanted things done differently, and he was a friend of mine too, and he was a very good asset to the company. And however, it was Sean liked his core guys, and there are certain people that like a different style of wrestling, which Sean talked about. And, Chris and his friend, they wanted to add different style, and they brought in the no limits, and they brought in these things. Well, there was some booking things. Edmund was going to be loyal to Sean, and right. Sean was going to be loyal to Ed. And Chris was real passionate about a couple ideas that he really wanted, and he was told no on. And I think that led to it, and they were starting to get aggravated, and there was some decisions made that night at the show that were previously supposed to be different. And it comes down to, now I know, I didn't know at the time, but booking a wrestling company, you can't make everybody happy. It's literally impossible. And wrestlers are a different breed. They're different to deal with. And sometimes wrestling fans don't understand that. And I wrestle for the fans. That's why I do. That's why I have my company. And I do so many charity shows. I love the fans. However, fans shouldn't always book wrestling shows.
Right.
Because, you always talk about how much you like Edmund. If you booked a wrestling show, you would want to book Edmund in matches that you like.
Right.
You would want to, and you can't always do that. And so they wanted these guys because they were fans of these guys. However, what I learned is AAPW created stars. Edmund McGuire was a star. Axe Allworth was a star. Heath Hatton was a star. Mississippi Madman was a star. However, the guys they wanted to bring in, they were indie stars, but they weren't AAPW stars. They weren't local stars. And they wanted to bring in different style. And it's like, no, you can't do that. We've already established for 2 years these guys. And so I was really good friends with Chris. Obviously, Ed was like a mentor, and I was a really good friend with Ed. And then Sean is, just to me, he is the nicest guy on the face of the earth. So I'm very loyal to Sean. So, I knew main event backstage, there was a lot of animosity. There was a lot of anger. So I feared something was coming. And when Chris called and told me, I knew that it was coming. And I called Sean, but Sean had already split, and I called Sean and I said, hey, they're wanting to start their own company, and Sean had moved away, so he wasn't going to keep AAPW going. And that was, it happened in the blink of an eye. It literally happened. And I, like Sean touched on it brilliantly. If I always look at myself, if I could have got Sean and Chris in a room without any outside distractions, AAPW would still be going today. There's no doubt in my mind.
Right.
Chris had somebody putting terrible ideas in his head. Sean was unable to communicate with Chris because of the outside interference Chris was getting. However, I think I could have bridged that gap, but it happened so quickly, and I was young. I didn't understand how wrestlers and wrestling business worked, and it all in the blink. I mean, just in one day, that was it. It was done and over, and it was heartbreaking.
Yeah. So you go off to Pro Wrestling Collision, and unfortunately, it just doesn't last too long. Why do you think that is?
So, in my opinion, um, Pro Wrestling Collision again. We didn't have Black Diamond. We were in Carbondale.
Right.
That's number one. Number two, it was being booked by a guy who is an amazing writer, an amazing marketer, and a really nice guy. However, he was a wrestling fan. He was just a fan. He wasn't one of the boys. He didn't understand how wrestling worked. He didn't have any knowledge of wrestling psychology. He's just a really good writer.
Right.
And there's a reason why WWE has writers, and then they have like agents and people that help with the matches. And anyway, you had a fan basically telling stories that did not make, you go back and watch Collision now, it just didn't make any sense. And then also, I think Chris he lost his heart for it.
Gotcha.
I think it wasn't the same. Chris wasn't as into it as he was. Chris had built AAPW up beautifully, and he had a great working relationship with Sean, and they worked great together, and they could bounce ideas, and that fell to the wayside. And I can remember I got who was going to be at the first show, and like I said, they were great to me. So this has nothing to do. I was the champ. They made me the champ. They made me the star of their show. So I mean, maybe it was me why it failed, but it was, in my opinion, it was. I saw the lineup for the first show, and there was no Madman. There was no Casey Jackson. There was no Edmund McGuire. There was no Shane Rich. There was none of these guys that AAPW had made stars. And when I brought that to the attention, it was, we don't need a bunch of old guys out here running around. And so you brought in these guys that were great talents, amazing wrestlers, but people didn't know who they were. And the only one they knew was me. And they had Axe Allwork, doing kind of goofy stuff, and AAPW didn't continue from that moment, and Pro Wrestling Collision was just something new. And it was very, we've always talked about the rise and fall of, in the locker room of PWC, but it was just a lot of really bad ideas, a lot of really bad storylines. And in their defense, people weren't as loyal. People were canceling on them constantly. People weren't wanting to come into work. But I think a lot of it was they didn't trust the direction.
Right.
And, I can remember I was told, I said, why is that guy doing that? And I was told, well, he's changed because of something to do with Twitter. And I said, you're giving a guy a push and booking a guy because of what he typed to you on Twitter? And I'm like, oh my God, this is going to fail. And it was, like I said, it was sad because I still am to this day, friends with Chris, and Chris is one of my favorite people on this earth. And I was actually friends with the other guy at the time, and I really wanted their company to work. I'm like, it could have been me. Maybe it was Heath Hatton didn't work. I don't know. But there was a lot of things that was just like you would shake your head and be like, what in God's name is happening?
Right.
Why are they doing this? And it was, there was never any reason given. That was always the good part about Edmund was, you could talk to Edmund and be like, hey, where are we going? And he would tell me, this is where you're going to end up. And okay, so then I could go tell a story there. I had no clue. I had no clue where I was going. I had no clue where I was wrestling, who I was wrestling, why I was wrestling them. It was just go do it. And I was just confused. And a lot of that wasn't their fault, but I think the main thing was it wasn't AAPW. There wasn't those guys. There wasn't those stars. And AAPW worked because we had so many stars and so many people that we built up, because you talked about it before. We started out with 10, 12 people, and we built stars on TV, and by the end, we had 200, 300, and 400 at main event. They came to watch those stars. Collision started, we had a big, huge crowd. They didn't know any of the guys. They only knew a few of them, and after that, they didn't come back. They were no longer interested because those stars were not there. And that's the sad part of it.
Right. Couple things I want to get to real quick. First of all, I got to have you back because we're not even going to have time to get into Stride, what you're doing now in the area. But I definitely want to go into that if that's okay with you on a later episode. You did mention that the product changed, and that was a bit of an issue between Chris's group and the Sean group. Do you think, because I like the no divisions limit or the no limits division or whatever, I liked all that stuff, but I also like the old stuff. Do you think, was there ever a chance for like cohesion with that from your perspective, or do you think it was kind of, it had to be one way or it had to be the other?
No, I think what was happening was working. I think with AAPW adding that stuff, bringing in Matt Cross, bringing in Pac and Generico, that worked. And you brought in this no limit, and you had that style, and that worked with the Bull Bronson and the Madman, and with the Edmonds and the Mikes and the Axes and the Heaths. That's what I do at Stride.
Right.
And Sean talked very about how that's why Stride has been successful, is I've sat back and watched what AAPW did wrong and what Pro Wrestling Collision did wrong and what other companies did wrong, and I've learned. But no, the thing is if you know me, people always laugh. I would get in trouble because I would go out and watch the show. So when they had the Jay Spade versus Joey O'Reilly match, I went out in the crowd and watched the show. And on AAPW, and I wanted to watch it. When Brandon Espinoza and Ace wrestled Team Overkill in a ladder match, I went out in the crowd and watched it because I love watching good wrestling.
Right.
And I think it definitely, like I said, I think season 3 of the APW, if it could have happened, was really going to build. And I think they had a lot of good stories that still could have been told. But it was the person in Chris's ear really, really wanted to do it his way. And Pro Wrestling Collision, it went that way. And it didn't work. And like I said, it was unfortunate. And like if those two could have just got in a room. But no, I love, I can't do it. I cannot do the flippy indie stuff. I'll kill myself. But I love watching it. I love, like we talked at the very beginning of this episode, I love wrestling. I'm obsessed with wrestling. If there's wrestling going on, I want to watch it. And it doesn't matter who it is. Girls, guys, big guys, little guy, it doesn't matter. I want to watch it, and I want to be entertained by it. And so I think what you said, you like the No Limit, but you also like, watching Edmund McGuire. And we had that finally in season 2, and we had kind of built something, and it just collapsed.
Right. Um, I know before we started recording, you said you kind of have a time limit. So, but I do, I want to talk more in depth about Stride, but because just tell me a little bit about what went into starting Stride, and then we can go on another day a little bit more in depth. Because I do have people that aren't from the area, and they'd probably love check out some of your stuff from your promotion.
Um, well, Stride just it was there was no wrestling going on really in the area, just a couple promotions. And to be honest, my friends weren't getting booked on them. Their other companies were coming in from different places, and my friends were not getting booked. And I wanted them to get booked, and I wanted them to wrestle. And a guy had a dojo, and they had a ring in it, and he messaged me and asked me if I wanted to train. And that was something that I was actually really passionate about. So I started a training school, and he said, "Hey, would you want to do a show?" And then that's how that kind of rolled. And it started out, it was going to be one and done. And
Right.
then our first show, I mean, gosh, I think we had like 480 people at our first show.
Wow.
And it was like, whoa. And there were people everywhere. And people were wanting to come back. And then from there, it was like, I'm going to have to start writing some storylines and booking. And we didn't even have a name the first
Right.
show. And so from there, we came up with a name. And then from there, it just kind of took off. And it is, I wanted to have a place where wrestlers could train, learn the way that I learned, learn how to basically do something that they love. But then also, like I touched on it earlier, I never got to cut a promo. I never got to do any of that stuff. So we do that stuff. We let new talent and trainees get a little mic time, learn how to tell a story, wrestle a veteran, get them to be able to play a character or play a role. And so that way they can go somewhere else and apply it. And that's what really Stride is all about. And we've built, I think, we've surpassed, what AAPW was able to do, which was my goal was to be on the same level as AAPW because I love AAPW so much, and I wanted to, to honor that. And I mean, we had 600 and I think 72, 73 people at West Frankfurt. And then we followed that up with over 500 people at Johnson City. And then we followed that up with close to 500 people at our anniversary show. And that was within a 3 month span. And the things that this company and the talent's been able to do is just it's and the crew that I have. I mean, gosh, I talked highly about him before, but like Kevin Hunsberger, I mean, there's just nothing that guy won't do or can't do. I mean, I bug him to death with
Right.
edit this, edit that, make this, make that. I need you to do this. I want you to ref. I need you to wrestle. I want you to get me. I mean, he just, whatever I ask him to do, he does. I feel like Paul Heyman, where it's like, do this and you're not going to get paid for it. And he does it. And so, and then, there's a guy named Sam Hamblin, Sam Hunter, who's my general manager, who makes my posters and does a lot of my editing. And I'm like, hey, do this at 2 o'clock in the morning, and he does it. And so, I mean, I get a lot of the credit because I'm the guy running the ship, but I have a lot of guys that help and really make Stride what it is, and it makes me look a lot better than I probably really actually am.
Well, I guess so. We know we're on time crunch, but before we leave, I want to make sure we to thank you for bringing pro wrestling back to this area. Thank you for all the people that I've gotten to meet through your promotion, and thank you for all the great matches in AAPW. I got a couple names for word association. If you think we could burn through them real quick.
Oh, we still got time, so go right ahead.
All right.
I'm
Well,
in
the
no
first name's Curly.
amazing human, um, friend, all around just amazing guy.
Mike Masters.
Jerk, butthole. Um, no, Mike is. Mike was when you trained with Mike, he was that hard nosed Chicago wrestler, trainer. He when I was going to wrestle for AAPW, I had to do a tryout match, and he got to come watch it. And he's the one that gave Sean the okay that I could wrestle. He took time to work with me, to talk with me, to really basically teach me an old school style that I loved. And Mike is, he's just, I got to have he had a retirement match and he asked to do it with me. And I was truly honored. We included his kids. And I think the absolute world of that guy.
Sean Chambers.
Nicest guy on the planet. My company exists because of that guy. He took care of me. You know, he, he was one of the reasons that I got into the business, and he was one of the people that I looked up to. And I honestly, I, and I'm not even kidding. I don't know. You get around Sean and you feel bad about yourself because he's that nice of a guy.
I can, yeah, I can't see that now that you mentioned
Yeah, I mean, you get done talking to him and you think you're not a good person because of
that.
how good of a person he is.
Shane Rich.
Mentor Shane Rich is he really took me under his wing. He spent more time with me than anybody else once I got trained. Um, he was the first person that I seen or that I wrestled that I felt like got me ready for bigger promotions like WWE. He had the look, he had the work, he was intelligent, he became my friend. He is still my friend to this day. He was the guy that you know, I wanted to be Shane Rich. I didn't want to be Stone Cold Steve Austin or Randy Orton. I wanted to be Shane Rich. And that sounds corny, but like I said, my first match was him and Shawn Schultz. I wanted to be Shane Rich. That's who I wanted to be. I was so impressed with him. And to become friends with somebody you kind of idolize is amazing. But yeah, he's a friend and he is beyond talented.
Livewire McGuire.
Goat cornerstone. Um, he like I said, I picked Edmund's brain before anybody else, and Ed taught me how to be the top baby face. I really struggled. Fans didn't like me when I was younger because I struggled with coming out and talking to fans because I was always so worried about my match or what I was doing. Ed taught me how to engage the fans when you're out there, how to just focus on them. And he taught me how to be the top guy. He took so much time and he taught me my company is successful. I'm successful as a baby face because of him. He taught me how to do that role and he taught me so many things. And even before I wrestled, Edmund became a friend of mine and a mentor of mine, and that's leaps and bounds above what many people have ever done for me.
Axe Allward.
Best wrestler I've ever wrestled, and friend. He he's my favorite opponent. He is the best person I've ever gotten in the ring with. I've learned more from him than I words when I started my company, he was the first person I called. The first person and I said, I want you part of it. And you're gonna be my first champion. That was the first call I made. That was the first thing I said. He is the greatest in ring person I have ever wrestled.
Chris Hagstrom.
Genius. talented, genius, super smart, humble. So I mean, just so smart, so savvy, so um, just the things that he did for Southern Illinois wrestling are you can't even talk about. But as far as the production, the things that he did, the camera angles, the production, the pre-production, the post-production, genius. That's not right. He's the man's a genius.
Kevin Hunsberger.
Um,
And I'm
well,
I'm
I won't.
giggling because we had a little fun at Kevin's
Yeah,
expense before we got started recording.
Kevin Hunsberger, one, is a friend, probably one of my best friends. And Kevin Hunsberger is the most talented human being I know. And as far as you ask him to wrestle, and he wrestles. You ask him to ref, and he refs. I ask him to edit stuff, and he edits it. I ask him to be professional, he's professional. I ask him to type something up, he types it up. He is one of the most well-rounded talents. Mike Stride could not go without Kevin. Stride would not be anything without Kevin. He is honestly, he's my right hand man at Stride, and he gets paid nothing. And he is I mean, as far as Stride goes, I mean, he as an announcer, as a play-by-play, the guy is just talented. He is so professional. He makes me look good. People all the time are like, "How's Kevin friends with you? He's so professional." They think I'm not, but I mean, I'm a better person because I am friends with Kevin. So he has made me a better leader, a better, person when it comes to booking wrestling shows. He is, like he's not only a friend, but he is somebody that if he told me he was leaving Stride, it would close.
Gotcha. The next name on the list was a last minute addition. Carnage.
Oh my God, I hate that guy. Good Lord, it was like he beat me, and I always told him. So when we did Resurrection, which I wish we could have talked more about Resurrection.
Well, we can make another episode for Resurrection because we've got. I've used the Conrad Thompson quote a lot with all you fellas. We have a lot more meat on this bone, especially with your own promotion. We didn't even get started on
I'm not,
talking.
but oh my God. So when Resurrection happened, I wanted to book Heath Hatton versus Carnage, and I was going to squash his ass in 3 minutes. And I was booking it, and I had Stride stuff going on, and I wanted to incorporate the Stride roster and crowd so that way it would get more people.
Right.
But I also wanted to bring back the APW hopefuls and fans. I was trying to figure out how I could wrestle Carnage. And with me and Kevin doing the tag team stuff that we had been doing at the time, and some other things, I couldn't do it. I couldn't. The guys that we wrestled and we were involved with, and the storylines that I was telling, it didn't seem fair to go away from that. But that's who I wanted to wrestle. There's just something. I'm driving down the road and I hear the man in the box, and I change the freaking channel because it makes me so mad. Because Carnage, every time I wrestled him, he beat me, and Carnage is such a big guy, so when
Right.
he hits you, you feel it. And it was like, man, I want to wrestle somebody who's like light, but every time I wrestled, I had to wrestle Carnage, and he would just beat the living crap out of you, and he would pin you. And so my goal is, I don't care. He's coming back. He's putting that damn mask on, and he's taking his spear, and I'm pinning him. So, and he's doing it, and like, and I'm getting all my crap in. So I hope he listens to this and he knows that one day, Resurrection 2, when Resurrection 2 happens, he's jobbing out to me. So,
You did mention you don't want to hear Man in the Box. I feel bad now. You can't appreciate a Tommy Dreamer match ever again because of Carnage. Carnage has ruined Tommy Dreamer for you.
yes.
Well, Heath, I really appreciate you doing this for us. I really, like I said, I really want to have you on again to talk about Stride because Stride has kept wrestling alive in this area. It's given me lots of great opportunities to see good wrestling, meet new people. We got to talk more about Resurrection. Uh, we got a lot more to talk about if you're willing to come back.
Yeah, anytime. I enjoy it. I enjoy going down memory lane. So,
Um, but you want to plug any social media or plug any Stride shows? I know this one. I know you got one coming up, but I don't think this will be out in time for that one. But
just follow Stride Pro Wrestling
okay, on.
on Facebook.
All
You can
right.
find it on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. But yeah, just Stride Pro Wrestling. That's the best way to keep up with what I'm doing nowadays.
Awesome. Yeah, Stride is so Stride. I'm not going to give away my exact hometown, but Stride brought Ricky the Dragon Steamboat to go to my town, and it was very surreal driving not even 10 minutes to meet Ricky Steamboat when I've driven so many long distances to meet wrestlers in the past. So I really appreciate you giving me a chance to meet one of my all-time favorites that close to me. Um, and thank you everyone for taking a listen. I hope you enjoyed as well. I certainly learned a lot from this one. And if you enjoyed, please give it a like, share, subscribe for more content, not just from the world of pro wrestling, but from the world of comics, anime, and all things geek culture. Follow me on social media, facebook.com/athleticgeek89, Twitter at athletic_geek89, and Instagram athleticgeek89. And if you want to donate financially, I have launched a Patreon. So all the money from that will go into making all of these productions better. Heath, thanks again. Had a great time listening. Definitely learned a lot about what was not only going on AAPW in Southern Illinois scene, but from OVW and WWE. I didn't even really expect to learn that much today, so this was awesome.
Oh, awesome. Well, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
No problem. We'll see y'all next time.